It seems.
All right, we're ready to call this meeting to order? Let's
do this.
Okay. Miss Hollywood, would you take roll?
Mr. Moldaver? Here. Mr. Smith?
Here.
Weber? Here. And Ms. Owens?
Here. Okay, next we have the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on April 22nd, 2015.
Madam Chair, move to accept the draft minutes as submitted.
You?
I'll second that.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None abstain. Any agenda adjustments, Mr. Benson? Any public comment this evening? Okay, seeing none. Committee member and staff communications.
No.
All right, on to the manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Back in January, the committee received a report on the city's street sweeping program from the transportation manager from Public Works. And the committee had several questions and concerns about that program and made a motion to pass those questions and concerns along to Public Works, which we did. Public Works staff had an opportunity to review those things and review the program, and did make some changes in response to the committee's the issues the committee raised. I think the most significant change was to remove the proposed $30,000 NPDES permit fee cost from the street sweeping program, and so that will now affect the transfer of funds from Measure B from this program into the street sweeping program. So the net effect of that and some of the other changes was to reduce the proposed transfer of Measure B funds to the street sweeping program for FY16 for the next fiscal year by approximately $43,000. So instead of transferring $113,802, the transfer that's proposed now is closer to $70,000. And I think that's it.
Thank you. And the last line, other recommended modifications will be considered as the program continues to evolve. Was that in response to the other questions that we submitted?
Yes.
Business items. First, the status report from the State Water Resources Control Board National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System General Permit from the Stormwater Management Program. We have Jim here.
I'm here.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. Thank you. So I'll start off with a little bit of background on our Stormwater Management Program, or SWIMP as we often call it. The origins of our SWIMP can be traced back to the Federal Clean Water Act, and specifically the NPDES permit, which is the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. And it essentially regulates stormwater discharges. The federal government authorized the state water boards and regional water quality control boards to administer the NPDES permit program. So the NPDES program has two phases. There's phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is larger communities like LA, and phase 2 is generally municipalities that are under 100,000 people. The phase 2 rules have been in effect since 2003, and the city has been implementing their stormwater management program since 2006. The Creeks Division provides the overall coordination of the program. However, many employees are responsible for meeting the requirements. Creeks Division does the reporting and making sure that city staff know what the deadlines are and what they're actually expected to do. The current Phase 2 municipal code or municipal general permit was adopted in February of 2013, and this replaced our stormwater management program. So the issue was there was all these different stormwater management programs amongst the Phase 2 communities, and the general permit standardizes the requirements and makes them more similar. So it's important to note that nothing in our old stormwater management program went away. All of the requirements are still in effect. We still have to meet all of the measurable goals. We just have new program structure, new reporting requirements, our new reporting system, and lots of new requirements. All these requirements went into effect July 1st of 2013. It's a 5-year permit cycle for the new general permit. We're currently in year 2, which ends June 30th. So with our old stormwater management program, it was basically a large text document, and the requirements were buried in this text document. We now have a guidance document with the general permit, and it's in a table format, an Excel spreadsheet, instead of this text format. And it's much easier to read and figure out what the requirements are. It has a list of all the requirements, who's responsible for those requirements, whether the city is currently meeting those requirements, and if not, how the city's going to do that. And it also lists all the deadlines and when they have to be met. We used to submit our annual report through email or through mail to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Now we have an online system where we upload all of our required submittals. Our most recent annual report was submitted electronically for year 1 in October 2014. There's lots of new requirements, as I mentioned, and I'm just going to briefly go over some of the main categories of new requirements. For outreach, we have a new community-based social marketing requirement, and this is a partnership amongst the cities in Santa Barbara County, and the idea is to have a coordinated message for outreach. And what we've chosen to do is the Close the Poop Loop campaign to target dog owners and getting them to pick up after their dog more frequently. You might have seen some of the posters around town. Each participant in this program got to choose one area where we would focus the outreach, and for the city of Santa Barbara, we chose the Arroyo Burro off-leash dog area. We also have new illicit discharge requirements, illicit discharge detection requirements. One item is an inventory of all commercial industrial facilities that don't have a discharge permit. So we're going to be compiling a list of facilities that potentially need one of these that we'll submit to the water board, and they'll ask them to get an industrial discharge permit. We also have to map all of our storm drain outfalls. So these are all of the areas in the creeks, or all of the pipes in the creeks where the storm drain system empties into the creek. We have to do training for all field staff, and this is to make sure that all staff that are in the field know what an illicit discharge is. We remind them what to look for, and we tailor their trainings to their workflow to help prevent them from committing an illicit discharge. We also have to do an enforcement response plan, and this is really nothing new, but we need to write down all of the procedures that we follow for enforcement and just formalize that. For water quality sampling requirements, we have to do a dry weather sampling of all of our outfalls. So we have to wait 72 hours after it rains, and then we'll walk around to all of our outfalls in the creeks, and if any of them are flowing, we'll take samples, and if any of the constituents that we're sampling for exceed a certain threshold, we'll start an enforcement case and potentially just figure out what's going on and how we can stop that. We also have some increased monitoring of our 303D listed water bodies. And 303D listed water bodies, if you don't know, they're a list of water bodies that the state compiles, and it's water bodies that the state feels have excess pollution and not enough's being done to stop that. So we're going to be doing some bacteria monitoring, and for Mission Creek, some toxicity monitoring. We also have a new, what the permit calls a special study, and we get to choose a project to do more intense water quality sampling on. And what we've chosen is to quantify the pollutant load for some of our capital projects. We've got some new permeable paver projects coming up that you might have heard about. The Alice Keck Memorial Garden, Veracruz, and Quarantina are going to get some permeable pavers. We've been doing sampling during storms to see what the type of pollutants are flowing off of those pre-project, and then we'll know how much of a load reduction we get once the project's installed. For construction requirements that are new, we have more staff training, mostly for staff that are doing inspections for construction projects that have erosion and sediment control plans, and also the building and safety staff that review those plans. We're also required to have a QSD and a QSP on staff, and the QSD is a qualified stormwater pollution plan practitioner or a developer, and the QSP is the qualified stormwater pollution plan practitioner. And so the QSD is someone who's supervising the review of these erosion control and sediment control plans, and the QSP is going to be the person who's supervising the inspections, so the building inspectors. We're also required to have and maintain an inventory of all construction projects that have sediment and erosion control plans. We keep a running inventory of those, and we have to do inspections of those projects as well. There's also new post-construction requirements, and this is kind of a strange term, and if you're not familiar with it, what that is construction projects that meet a certain trigger have to do structural best management practices, or for example, permeable pavers, bioswales, bioretention systems, or cisterns. And these are systems that will treat the stormwater from hardscape before it flows off into the storm drain system. So I just included a few examples of some of these best management practices to give you a better idea of what they entail. This is a permeable paver project, and the idea is that the water will flow down through those pavers and infiltrate. In this particular project, there's a cutout in the curb that you can see there. So when the basin gets full, the stormwater will spill over into that basin for additional treatment in that in the vegetated area there. Here's an example of a bioswale. This has a parking lot that the stormwater will flow off into the concrete swale and into this drainage ditch that's been modified here. And you can see that there's some soil and plants, and a lot of these will have gravel drainage layers below that to increase infiltration. So the stormwater will flow through and infiltrate down and also get some nutrient uptake from the plants. Here's an example of a bioretention planter. And it's kind of hard to see, but there in the back there's downspouts that are disconnected, and they will flow from the roof to the planter. And this planter has soil. It's usually a very sandy soil that has really good infiltration rate, and below that there'll be a gravel drainage layer. Some of these will have under drains. I don't see any in the photo, but sometimes there's under drains. So the water will flow down through the media layers and then out. And the idea is that it's treated and cleaner as it flows out to the storm drain. So we do have new post-construction requirements. However, the city applied for an exemption, which was granted by the Water Board. And we've been implementing a post-construction program since 2008. And the Water Board found that our existing program provided a greater water quality benefit than the regulations that were proposed. One thing we did not get an exemption from was the regional board, or the general permits requirement that we have a stormwater ordinance. And this was something they wanted to take our post-construction requirements and make them enforceable. So we adopted a stormwater municipal code in 2013, and this just essentially took our existing post-construction requirements and codified them into a municipal code. So now that we have our stormwater ordinance in place, the next steps that we need to complete, year 2 ends on June 30th, and we need to make sure that all city staff are meeting those requirements, and that we meet all of them as a city. And then on July 1st, year 3 begins, and we'll start working on those requirements. October 15th of this year is when our second year annual report is due. And that's all I have. If you all have any questions, I'm happy to answer those for you.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah, very informative and complete. Any questions?
Madam Chair, the creek testing for bacterial and other pollutants, is that related to the contracts we sometimes give with Trish Holden and her associates? or is that a different?
This will be an addition to that. This is for the 303D listed water bodies. So Mission Creek is listed for bacteria and toxicity. We'll be doing testing for that water body, and then Arroyo Burro and Sycamore are listed for bacteria.
I know during the NBA playoffs, it's hard to ask someone to go out on a limb and make a prediction, but when we get to June 30th, then we have to assess whether all parts of the city have been doing their collective best to adhere to the municipal code in support of the SWIMP. Is that going to be a successful assessment?
I think it will be, yeah. Last year, we met all the requirements last year, and this year I don't anticipate it to be any different.
And then the last thing, which is the 10,000-foot one, which might be better put to Alan Rose than you is, we're doing all the storm water management stuff, and we're in the middle of a historic drought. So we haven't really had any gully washing storms in several years. How do you and your team assess, based on the limited rain that we've had in very dry winters, how well we would be doing if, let's say, next year really is an El Nino winter, that we had a lot of rain very quickly?
Sure. You're talking post-construction requirements? Yeah, so anytime it has rained recently, just even last week, I was out doing inspections. That's one of our requirements. We're required to do 20 hours of inspections a year. And so, yeah, it's best to do it when it rains, because you're right, you can really see if a system's working or not. But we can also do inspections when it's not raining. You know, we can go out there, meet with property owners, and ask them to show us around and just see if they're being maintained. Bioswales are still planted, and we can tell. You can tell if water is going to be flowing to a BMP or not. So ideally, yeah, we need some rain, but we can do the inspections without it as well.
I had a question related to the oil spill that we suffered up at Refugio last night.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility that one, I guess that the slick could make it down here, and then two, that it might move up any of the creeks?
You know, I really don't have a good answer for that. I don't really know. Cameron, do you have any more insight on that?
I think the chances of it moving up the creeks are slim, because I think all the creeks are bermed off right now. So the estuary is separated from the ocean by a sand berm. So I don't see it coming up the creeks. I don't know. I don't know what direction the oil's moving in right now. I read something this morning that said the currents in that location would potentially move the oil up towards Point Conception. So I don't know if it's moving up there, coming down.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Jim. Next, we have a Water Quality Code Enforcement Program update from Christopher Clark, Creeks Code Enforcement Officer. Welcome, Christopher.
Let me say hi. I've met a few of you. I'm new here at the Creeks, but it's nice to meet all of you. And let me apologize ahead of time. I've been nursing a cough over the last couple of weeks, so hopefully we can get through this with minimal interruptions. But I'm just going to give you guys a status update on our water quality enforcement program. City's Municipal Code, Title 16, water pollution prohibited. This covers illicit discharges into the storm drain system. Typically, examples of this are things like construction runoff, wash water from commercial properties and mobile businesses, vehicle leaks, and illegal dumping, things of that nature. Our enforcement hotline comes straight to my office, and this is monitored during our regular business hours. Our goal is to investigate all reports immediately so we can stop active discharges and get cleanup started as quickly as possible. And so far this fiscal year, we've had 100% same-day response, and typically it's as soon as we get the report in, we're able to go out and respond to it. And then the public's also able to submit reports online from the city webpage. So here's a rundown of the sources of our enforcement calls. Majority of them have come from Creeks Division staff themselves, and then another good portion comes from other city staff. We do rely a lot on city residents as well, and then outside agencies will also report into us. And here's a rundown of the discharge sources. So things like restaurants, commercial properties, construction sites, just sort of breaking it down so we get a good idea of the source of different discharges. Commercial and industrial sources continue to sort of be the leading source. This generally is like wash water and things like that. So I've got a few examples of some discharges from this year. The upper photo is a curb drain which drained from a restaurant, and the discharge traveled down the street about 2 blocks into a catch basin inlet, which outfell into Mission Creek. And that pool in Mission Creek is directly below the outfall. And there was about 50 or 60 gallons of wash water that made its way into the creek. And we got that all cleaned out, which was good, and worked with the restaurant owner to try to prevent any future discharges. So hopefully that will be not happening at that location anymore. Excuse me. This was an air conditioning unit being repaired on a roof, and the workers had kind of hosed the area on the roof without stopping up the roof drains, so it made its way out into the street. I was able to have them plug up the drains and capture their wash water before too much got out there, which was fortunate. Water main breaks continue to be a large source of sediment. Oftentimes it can take quite a while before workers are able to shut off the source of the water, and steps are taken early on to try to minimize the amount of sediment that's going out. But as you can see in this one, the best management practice of the filter fabric was just overwhelmed by the amount of water coming through. And this was down kind of in the funk zone area and required quite a bit of cleanup that took quite a bit of time. And Public Works is actually currently replacing the entire section in that area of the water line to try to reduce the number of breaks in that area. Here we have a construction crew doing some core drilling over a bridge. This is down near Bonet Park. As you can see, there's no protection of the drop inlet over the bridge, which drains directly into the creek underneath it. This is a section of Old Mission Creek. So I contacted the construction workers and had them clean that area up and had them put in some sandbags and other things to isolate the catch basin for the next day's work. And they even called in and asked for advice on their next job site. So hopefully they'll have things prepared next time they're working. This is some kind of filter box that was installed at some point behind one of the nightclubs downtown. Their sort of back patios drain into this box, and there's sort of filters in it, but it wasn't maintained, and this box then drained directly into a catch basin, and it was originally found due to the odor that was coming from it. So that this box was cleaned and eventually removed, and I've been working with the nightclub management to make sure that there isn't any more wash water or whatever that happened to be going into the storm drain system at that location. Illegal dumping continues to be a major source of trash in the creeks. This is an area near the Amtrak station in Mission Creek. It continues to be a pretty constant source of illegal dumping. But typically we're able to get excuse me, our contractor out to get it cleaned up pretty quickly. And in this case, this was a day before one of the few rainstorms that we had, and we were able to get it all out before the rain came through, which was good. A lot of times from construction projects, the issues tend to be sediment control or discharges from saw cutting operations. A lot of times workers just don't think about where the concrete slurry is going. So this one tends to be pretty obvious to see, so we tend to get a lot of reports on it and make sure that it gets cleaned up, and hopefully it doesn't happen again. Here's our enforcement data for the number of reported violations, the notice of violations that we've issued, citations over the last few years. We're kind of on track this year to have similar numbers from previous years. And again, we continue to have 100% response rate this year, which was what we'd been working towards over the last number of years. Illegal dumping and encampment cleanup. This is another big portion of what I do. So a lot of these can come from enforcement calls that come in to us and reports of pollution to us, but a lot of these are found by city staff. And typically with these instances, it's difficult to enforce against because we rarely find the person responsible. A lot of the hot spots right now is in the Fish Passage area of Mission Creek. This is in the downtown corridor. It's a very popular location for transient encampments. It's very private, so there's been a lot of activity in that area. Mesa Creek, which runs along Cliff Drive next to the Douglas Family Preserve and runs into Arroyo Burro Lagoon. This is a very difficult location to get to, and recently we found a very large number of encampments in the area. Sycamore Creek near the railroad tracks. This is down in near the waterfront by the zoo. Continues to be a popular location. And Arroyo Burro, there's a concrete channel up near Hope Avenue that has some pretty permanent residents up there. So this is the Fish Passage in Mission Creek. The top of the creek banks are very flat and well vegetated, so they make pretty good hiding spots. This is the top portion of it. As you can see, people have done grading of the soil at the top, and there were some pretty permanent structures in place before we came through and removed them. And typically these locations, once we've cleaned it out, someone will move in again a few days later. This is under the Montecito Street Bridge at Mission Creek. This was a very large encampment with multiple people living in it. It was a chronic issue for quite a while, but I was able to bring the police department to get involved in it, and we've been camp-free for a couple of weeks now, and I'm hoping we can keep up the pressure and not have that, because this was a large source of trash and other pollutants directly into the creek channel there. So this is one of the encampments found up in Mesa Creek. Most of them had been abandoned, but and a lot of the plastics and things were starting to break down. So we were able to get all that stuff out of there before it made its way down into the creek. This is the concrete channel up by Hope Avenue. This is my buddy Ronnie. He's been down in there for quite some time now. This was sort of the height of his encampment. I still find him down there every now and then, but we've been staying on top of him pretty well, so he's not bringing nearly as much stuff down in the creek as he used to be. The police department's also heavily involved in this one, and we're staying on top of him. This is a drainage channel at the border between City College and Plaza Del Mar, or Pershing Park, as a lot of people know it. The bathrooms at that location are closed down due to issues with homeless in the park. So with the bathroom closed, they've turned to using this drainage channel as a bathroom and a trash can. So that gets cleaned up a lot. And this is one of the major waterways that actually empties directly out into the harbor. So getting this cleaned up is a big priority for us. So city policy for encampments, we have to give a 48-hour notice before we can clean up an encampment. This gives occupants an opportunity to remove, their valued possessions. And then after those 48 hours, a contractor comes through and cleans the area. Here's an example of one of our notices. So we're able to take a picture of the encampment, take a picture with the notice in place. And again, this gives the occupants time to remove their items, and also gives them some literature and information on why it's going on, and gives them the opportunity to contact us if they have any questions. Each cleanup site, city's charged $104 by the contractor. So far this year, 723 sites have been cleaned for a total of 87,680 pounds of trash. Comes out to about 121 pounds per site. And we're well on track to reach about 100,000 pounds this year, I'd estimate, by the end of the fiscal year. Some of the major items found, a couple that kind of jump out at me, are the number of paint cans, and these include spray paint as well as larger paint containers. And then the plastic bags and feces are kind of the other big ones. We're hoping that the plastic bag ban may have an impact on that. A lot of that may also just be that people tend to store their items in trash bags, so that may continue to be a relatively high number. And then typically with most sites, especially where people are living or provide a hidden location, we tend to have a lot of fecal incidents. And that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Chris. In what percentage of cases when you encounter somebody in the creek, when you return after 48 hours, are they still there?
I would say a majority of them. They'll at least leave most of the trash behind. Typically, they'll take like their backpack with them, but not bother to really clean up. Very rarely do people actually clean up after themselves in those cases.
They're still there when you go back?
A small portion of them will the occupants actually still be there. Usually they'll clear out before the crew gets there.
What do you do if the occupants are still there?
If they're still there and they try to interfere with the crew cleaning up, then PD's contacted. If they're there and they don't get in the way, I'll usually try to talk to them, encourage them to move on to another location. And if it's someone that I've talked to more than once, then I'll have PD also get involved in those cases.
When you initially contact them, do you give them any information about where they can go?
I encourage them, go to shelters or things like that, or take advantage of other programs that are here and available in the city. I also will refer them to there's a particular police unit called restorative court, which really tries to help chronically homeless individuals get housing and deal with their legal issues and things like that. So I tend to try to refer them to that program in particular.
Thanks. Other questions?
When you were talking about the amount of stuff collected so far, and you had year to date, is that calendar year or fiscal year?
That's fiscal year. So the data for the cleanup so far, we have to get the information back from the contractor, and so far I'd only gotten information up to the end of March. Yeah.
Okay, but with the next quarter, that'll be the end of the current fiscal year, right?
Correct. The fiscal year ends June 30th.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So, right. So the numbers up there for the current year, we're showing 3 quarters.
Any other questions?
I just had a couple of quick questions. Going back to the enforcement case data of the NOVs that were issued for 59 for fiscal year 2015 to date, did it match similarly to the number of violations reported? In that, are you seeing most of those notice of violations being issued to commercial industrial facilities, or is it kind of a mix? Does that make sense?
I don't know if I could speak directly to an exact proportion of that, but typically, any time that we find an actual discharge, we're going to be sending out an NOV, and I wouldn't be able to speak directly on the correlation right now.
Our office is located in a funky zone where we often are calling you guys too, so just curious what you're finding in when those are issued. And then my second question is, I've spent a fair amount of time in the creeks with you guys sometimes as well, picking up trash, and we saw this issue as well on the Ventura River with homeless encampments, and I was just curious, does the cleanup contractors that you hire, do they actually, I saw that you were including in your count feces, are they picking those up as well?
Yes, when they come across those things, it's removed. Yeah.
That's it for me. Thanks. Nice work.
Thanks. Any other discussion, questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn? No? Okay.
Madam Chair, since this is one of the most popular and highly followed meetings among public agencies on the South Coast, could we review the time and place of our next meeting? I mean, now that Mad Men is off the air, I think our number of followers
Spoiler
is just going
alert.
to surge. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Moldaver. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, June 17th, here in the City Council chambers at 5:30.
Okay, Madam Chair, with the wish that everyone has a safe, great Memorial Day weekend and stops by our booth at EMOD NRA for some great food, I would like to move that we adjourn.
Thank you. Great. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're adjourned.